Hi there, this is Pete Howard, Director of Concert Posters for Heritage Auctions. And boy, what a poster from the David Schwartz Concert Poster Collection here. The earliest known concert poster with Bob Dylan on it, spelled correctly, of course, that is. The earliest one known and the only one known. This is the only one to ever turn up. Look, I've been collecting Bob Dylan seriously since 1972. The handbills are nice. They come up once in a while. I'd never seen this until David turned it into this auction for us to auction off to you. So, and that includes a, worldwide clutch of Dylan collectors. Just, this might be the only one saved, or who knows, one of the 6 musicians that are still their estates may have one. But in other words, forget about it, nada. It's as rare as it gets. So now, of course, we've had the pleasure of auctioning off the earliest Bob Dylan concert poster, period. That's April 1962 at the University of Michigan Folk Festival, and it's spelled like Matt Dillon was back then, D-I-L-L-O-N. Love that poster for sure, not disparaging in a tiny bit, but whenever you have something you can hang a hook on, and Bob Dylan spelled correctly the first known concert poster, that's really something darn special. Now you might be wondering, April, October, that's a 6-month gap. Well, we have to remember that Dylan was doing almost exclusively folk clubs, along this part of his career, not so much concerts. And of course, folk clubs did not make concert posters. They would just do handbills or something. So, but here it is. There's Bob Dylan right at the top. And that's pretty fortuitous that Dylan's top listed because he's the one we collect the poster for now. But John Lee Hooker at the time, wow, what a blues legend, what a guy. So the best I can figure is those names are listed in alphabetical order, starting, with the first name. If you look at it, it goes B-I-J-J-L-S. So I think that's probably how they picked the order. And across the top there, the Folklore Center, which if you're a Dylan scholar, that means Izzy Young. Such a sweet guy who's no longer with us, but he was Mr. Folklore Center there in Greenwich Village back in the early 60s and instrumental in Dylan's early career. So it says, presents the Traveling Hootenanny. And then it says in the type under that, a special kind of hootenanny. And I'll say it's not just these 6 musicians, but people from the audience, if they brought their guitar or banjo and were encouraged to, got up on the stage as well. So what a hoot that must have been. Hoot, of course, playing in Hootenanny, but boy, that is a special kind of traveling hootenanny. Now the traveling part we're not so sure about. This was intended to be the first one, and then it would move to different cities and perhaps in the following year. But as far as we know, the Folklore Center gave up on it after, or I shouldn't put it in that words. The main thing is this is the only one that we know of that happened, of the Traveling Hootenanny. So you've got Bob Dylan there, and then you have Ian and Sylvia, the Canadian folk duo, who would record for Vanguard Records. And then, as I said, legend John Lee Hooker. Nice Dylan tie there, because the first known Bob Dylan handbill is opening for John Lee Hooker at Gertie's Folk City back in April of 1961. So it's nice the way the first handbill and the first poster spelled correctly with Dylan also has John Lee Hooker on it. That's a nice little thing. After that is Judy Collins, very famous name, Electra Records recording artist. Heck, I saw Judy in concert just a year or 2 ago. And so she's still out there plugging away, which is nice. And Lynn Gold is the second from the last name. She had an folk album on Warner Brothers the following year in 1963. And fun tidbit, Lynn Gold called into Heritage a few months ago. I got the call. This call was sent to me, of course. And I talked to Lynn for a few minutes, and she was really a nice lady, just really a sweetheart. And believe it or not, she was calling because she had seen us auction off a handbill of this earlier and wanted to get the image or something because her name was on it along with Dylan's. So I had to break the news to her. She actually asked about the poster, and I had to break the news to her saying, one known to exist, price level really high, sorry, and we don't make copies of things even for people on the posters. But anyway, point being, Lynn Gold became a real living, breathing name to me then instead of just one folk album way back, in 63. And then the last name is Sandy Bull, another Vanguard recording artist like Ian and Sylvia. So there you have the 6 main musicians. They got that fun center graphic of a acoustic guitar standing up on an old-time carriage, and that nice rust or orange background's pretty cool. And then, of course, the words you can see easily: Town Hall, Friday, October 5th, 8:30 p.m. Tickets, $1.75 to $3. It's kind of funny, we look back in retrospect, it's like, why would anybody buy the cheap ticket? $1 difference, actually $1.25. Well, we have to remember, you have to put yourself back then. If you bought the $1.75 ticket, you could take that $1.25 and get a hamburger, a fries, a Coke, and more, maybe 2 hamburgers. That's how cheap fast food was back in the early 60s, and so that was a price difference. It's almost like for the $3 you had to spend more for food, but $1.75 you could go stuffed, full of food. So that's that's why that did mean something to have those price differences. So this poster and this event took place exactly halfway between Dylan's first 2 albums, Bob Dylan and the Freewheelin. So that's really fun to place it there. And from that first album, which was already out, he did Talkin' New York, one of the few songs he wrote on his first album. And then from the forthcoming Freewheelin, he did 2 songs. He did Talkin' John Birch Society Blues, talk about a key controversial one. And I know it's not on the final version of the Freewheelin', but it's on the rare one. And if you're this far with me as a Dylan head, you probably agree John Birch is a Freewheelin' track. And then A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, he did as well. And then in typical Dylan fashion, he even did a song that wouldn't come out until his 3rd album, The Times They Are A-Changin', and that was the ballad, the Ballad of Hollis Brown. Now, one fun fact I like to point out about this poster, October 1962, it's not too much of a stretch to say this was the month that Bob Dylan went electric. Pause for effect. You're going, yeah, right. I saw A Complete Unknown. It was the Newport Folk Festival. Well, the fact is, what I mean is that this was the month, October 1962, that Dylan got together in a Columbia recording studio with 5 musicians and recorded something, actually I think about 3 tracks, and one of them got released, and that's Carina Carina on the Freewheelin', which has those musicians, including Bruce Langhorne on guitar, and another guitarist, and a drummer, and a pianist, and so forth, so a bassist, of course. So, and it was released, on the Freewheelin', Carina Carina. And Mixed Up Confusion was another thing they recorded, which is quite an up-tempo thing. And that came out as a single, but absolutely died a horrible death, went nowhere. So anyway, I know that's a funny thing about Dylan going electric in October of '62, but it was the first time. And of course, that completely turns upside down the whole plot of A Complete Unknown, right? The great movie that hopefully you saw, and I saw 3 times, but it really was publicly, he went electric, or at least live, of course, at Newport. So, but that movie covers this era very thoroughly. It's just a delightful movie. So, okay, special poster from the David Schwartz Concert Poster Collection, and this is coming on Friday, July 11th. So to read the long description and get some close-up looks at it, just go to ha.com/7420.